What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Verk Presents Hockey Cards at TVP Hockey Cards. And today what we're going to do is review the Series 1 checklist for 2021-22 Upper Deck. It's finally been released. It just got released the other day. So we have the 50 Young Guns, or I guess the 49 Young Guns in the checklist for Series 1. And I'm just going to quickly review in terms of some of the stuff going on with Upper Deck. Usually Series 1 comes out usually in November. That always has the 50 Young Gun cards. And then Series 2 usually comes out in February, sometimes March. And that will have another 50 Young Gun cards. So usually a total of 100 cards. And last year, of course, the last few years with the pandemic, everything's been thrown out of whack. But last year especially, Upper Deck was able to get some exceptions with the NHL to include some of those bubble players, because there's a certain point that they cut off players from appearing in the series until the following year. So because of that, Alexis Lafreniere was the top pick, and he was able to be included in Series 1 last year. So Series 1 released in November. Series 2, headlined with Kirill Kaprizov, was released in March. And this year, it was supposed to come out Series 1 in November. It kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And now, next month in February, we will finally get Series 1. And so, the interesting thing is that there are a lot of names that are missing from Series 1. It's, to me, a very underwhelming list. Concerning all of the rookies that are currently in the NHL or, had a cup of coffee earlier in the season. So there is a lot of cards that are not spoken for in Series 1. You would any other year assume by default that they would be in Series 2, which would mean an absolutely loaded class. However, last year, of course, we know about that extended series that came out, which essentially was like a Series 3, and the 30 Young Gun cards that were included in that weren't the greatest. Besides like Arthur Kaliev, there really wasn't anybody else that stood out. So my only concern is there's a lot of names not included in Series 1, so will they spread them out in Series 2? Will there be another extended series? And could there also just be possibly some names pushed to next season? Now, the other interesting thing is, for the most part, anybody that was taken in the draft last year in terms of, from the first round, none of those guys, I think, are playing in the NHL right now. I mean, Owen Power is going to the Olympics, Buffalo Sabres first round pick. The Seattle Kraken had the second overall pick with Matty Beniers. He didn't play in the NHL this year. Dylan Gunther is another guy. Luke Hughes, Kent Johnson. So there's a lot of guys that aren't even going to be in any of the series for this year, because they aren't going to be up until next year. So we'll just go through the list. I will quickly give you a summary of some of the guys that I think stand out, and then I'll kind of just really quickly glance over some other guys. So the only card that we've known about for months was number 201, which is usually, a big number. In this case, it's going to be Cole Caulfield after his, arrival in the playoffs last year for Montreal and how well he played. This year, Cole Caulfield has not been good at all. He got sent down even to the minors. However, by default, because it is Cole Caulfield, because he's a Hobey Baker winner, and because he was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, he's still a top-end prospect. He's having a really crappy season, but this card is still going to be worth a lot. And, being in the Montreal market by default makes it worth a lot. And if that sounds silly, think about this. In 1920, when you had Series 1, you had Jack Hughes, Quinn Hughes, and Adam Fox as the big three cards in that one. In Series 2, you had Cale Makar, which of course was the biggest card of that year, and Nick Suzuki. So why is Nick Suzuki's card valued so much more than Jack Hughes, who I think is by far a more superior player, right? Some of it's just built on hype. It's a lot of guys that, the hype carries them, and so they end up costing a lot more than they're really worth. And that's how I feel Caulfield is right now. He's still going to go for a couple $100. Like, that's just, it kind of happens every year when the new rookies come out and they're all hyped up. They go for a lot. So if you want to go on eBay right now and look for a Cole Caulfield Young Gun to make a pre-sale purchase, it's going to be anywhere between $200 and $300 US, Canadian, whatever. So I would just wait. If you aren't able to, grab Caulfield anytime soon, that price is going to drop eventually, and you might be able to get him a little bit cheaper. But he's still one of the best young guns in this series. To me, he's not the top one by far in this series, but he is one of the top 5 for sure. 202 is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Buffalo Sabres goalie. He actually played a little bit earlier this season. He didn't have bad stats, and he's kind of considered the goalie of the future. The Sabres have absolutely no goalies. Aaron Dell just got suspended. Dustin Tokarski is hurt. Craig Anderson's out. They've gone through like 6 goalies or something like that this year. Luukkonen has a future in Buffalo if they want to go that route, unless they sign a veteran in the future. So he's goalie cards are usually decent, and sometimes the backup turns into a star. And remember, goalies take a while to develop, so Luukkonen might be a good investment for down the road. The next few cards are Ole Alzing and Dakota Joshua for the Senators and Blues respectively. Every year when there's 50 young guns, there's at least probably about 35 names that everybody's going to be like, WTF, and part of it's going to be like, who the heck is this guy? And that's how I feel about these two. I don't expect either of them to make a big impact at all. They're just part of the series. So Ollie Alsing, Dakota Joshua, no disrespect, but I don't see you guys making an impact. Card 205 is Jamie Drysdale of the Anaheim Ducks. Now this is another high-end, definitely a top 5 card. He already played in the NHL last year as an 18-year-old, and he's another offensive defenseman that plays the game a little bit differently. He is going to be the best defenseman in this series for sure. So that's not even a question. He's definitely a worthwhile investment. And so I would grab my Drysdale cards if I can. Kyle Burrows, Tarmo Rantanen, and Mike Hardman for the Avs, Rangers, and Blackhawks respectively. Wade Allison for the Flyers, Marian Studenik of the Devils, and Keaton Middleton of the Avalanche. All 6 not high-end prospects. I wouldn't expect any of them to turn into something. They're again part of the low-level, young guns as part of this set. 212 is Joe Veleno of the Red Wings. He was a first-round pick. He has played. He hasn't put up big numbers, but he still has that pedigree. As a first-round pick, you usually have a little bit more leeway. Red Wings are rebuilding, and even though they have some other players that have been ripping it up, Veleno has not been one of them, but he is still a decent player that we really don't know what the future will hold. Wyatt Kalynuk of the Blackhawks, Garrett Pilon of the Capitals, Morgan Barron of the Rangers, Radim Zohorna of the Penguins, Jack Akan of the Bruins, and Joshua Dunn of the Blue Jackets. Again, Kalynuk might have some time as a 4th liner for the Blackhawks. The rest of these guys, I don't see them making much of an impact. And again, if I pronounce these guys' names wrong, I'm sorry. I don't really know these guys that well because they're not high-end guys. They're not guys that when you're researching for prospects, I'm not a prospect junkie that looks at every single guy in every organization. I just look for the top-end guys, and none of these guys are it. The same applies to Joshua Dunn of the Blue Jackets, Logan Thompson of the Golden Knights, Brinson Pasek, I guess, of the Sharks, R2 Ruotsalainen of the Sabres. Same thing, low-end young guns to me in this series. Tanner Gino of the Predators. Gino's had a great rookie season. He's been actually one of the top rookie scorers, kind of came out of nowhere, was not really talked about much going into the season, but he's been a revelation for the Predators, and he's not a top 5 guy in this class, but he's one of the more desirable guys, I guess, right outside the top 5. So Gino is definitely a guy, if you can get him, it's not a bad buy at all right now. The next card for sure is a buy no matter what, and that's Spencer Knight of the Florida Panthers. Last year when he came in, he was ripping it up. People had this assumption that somehow he would take Bobrovsky's job. Now, Bob had a brutal season, but Bobrovsky's had, up and down seasons before. So Knight, as expected as a 20-year-old, has struggled this year. He's been in the backup. Bob's been the number 1, and that's for sure, especially for a team that's a Stanley Cup contender. However, Knight is the goalie, will be the top goalie in Series 1 and Series 2, so he is going to be an expensive card to invest in. Ross Colton of the Lightning, he's was on the team last season. late last season and also has been playing regularly this season. Lately, he's been playing a little bit better. He wasn't really doing much earlier in the year. However, with Kucherov being out recently and some other injuries up front, he's had a chance to kind of be in the middle six role. So he's kind of a decent player in that sense. 225 is Philip Gustafson of the Senators. Could be considered the goalie of the future. We're really not sure there. He was not too bad in limited time last year. But again, goalies are fickle. We don't really know which way things are going to go. However, he's a decent, probably a top 10 worthy card in this series. Another goalie comes in at 226, and that's Jeremy Swayman of the Bruins. He came in last year, was lights out in only like 10 games. This year, he's kind of been, he's played good, but Linus Ullmark was there, and recently they brought back, Tuukka Rask, so Swayman was able to be sent down to the minors because he's on a 2-week contract. He's also a little bit of an older prospect. However, he's still, remember Tim Thomas was an older guy too, right? I mean, Swayman's not as old as Tommy was, but he still is a guy that can be the goalie of the future and overtake Ullmark and be their guy. So, or if not, Boston can always use him as a trade chip. Kalen Addison of the Minnesota Wild, another good young defenseman. I believe he's only 21 and hasn't put up big numbers or anything. However, again, he has the time to develop as a young defenseman in the Minnesota organization. And they have some young talent on that team coming up front as well. So I would keep an eye out for Addison. By default, he's kind of a top 10 card in this series. Simon Benoit of the Ducks, Daniel Walcott of the Lightning, Matthias Samuelsson, Sabres, Zach Jones of the Rangers. All, Jones can be a potential guy that does something in the future for us. However, the other guys in there, I wouldn't really count on them anything more than low-level young guns. Now, the card in this series is the card right here pictured below, and that's our man Trevor Zegras. He is the card to get in this series. He will be easily the best player in this series. I'm sorry, it's not going to be Cole Caulfield. It will be Zegras. If you saw, he just scored that the Michigan goal the other day. He had that crazy Sonny Milano alley-oop pass a few months ago. The kid's a highlight reel. He's amazing with his hands. He's only going to get better. He's probably one of the favorites for the Calder. Definitely will be a finalist. And the kid, Anaheim's got a lot of young talent, and this kid is going to be the guy to take from this series. And if you can get him, he's better than what Lafreniere was, right? Like Lafreniere, he's got all that potential. And at this point, it's not even close. Zegras is way better than him. So this card is probably going to go for anywhere from $350 to $400 when it comes out in a couple of weeks here. So grab it if you can. Going back to the rest of the list, we got Jeffrey Veal. He's kind of a bit of a fighter for the Sharks. He's kind of a fan favorite. We'll have a little bit of a role with that team going forward, but he is not a big card, I would say. Lane Peterson, Mark McAllis, Tanner Lachinsky, Jeremy Davies, and Jackson Cates, all for the Coyotes, Canucks, Flyers, Predators, and Flyers again, respectively. I don't expect any of them to be big players in the NHL. Same goes for Tyce Thompson of the Devils, Parker Kelly of the Senators. They're low-level young guns, the way I see it. Alex Barré-Boulet for the Lightning still has potential. He's a guy that has upside. Lightning always seem to find guys. They develop guys out of nowhere, and they manage to keep staying competitive. So he's a card that might turn into a worthwhile investment. He's more of a middle, and basically in this series, he ends up being kind of more towards a top 10-ish kind of card, or right outside the top 10. If there was all those other names that were missing, they would overtake this guy, no problem. However, he is still a decent bet. Rasmus Kupari of the Kings also, and same with Cam York of the Flyers. These two are good cards to have. Potential is there, not to be high in talent or anything, but to turn out to be decent players in the NHL. York's been playing pretty regularly for the Flyers, so he's a guy that hasn't done much in terms of points, but he's got some potential. Matt Kiersted of the Panthers, Low-level young gun, Michael Hauser, the Sabres, good story. I think he's 29, 30 years old. Just played a few weeks ago, made his debut for the Sabres after many years in the minors. Had a really good debut. But again, I wouldn't expect much from him. Shane Pinto for the Senators, another young player that has potential. They have a lot of young pieces in Ottawa, and so he's a one that we don't know in terms of upside, where he's going to be at in the future. It's kind of a gamble with him. Cole Lind at 247 for the Canucks is what the card says. Really, Cole Lind was taken by the Kraken in the expansion draft. Sorry. And one thing to point out: there's a bunch of teams on this checklist that are not represented. The Calgary Flames, the Edmonton Oilers, and notably the Seattle Kraken don't have any players on this list, and so part of it is just the situation those teams are in. There's also some other teams I know I'm missing that aren't on here as well that I can think of. But yeah, there's a bunch of teams that aren't on here. So if you can't, get a card for them, if you're, looking forward to grabbing something for that team, I think the Jets are another team that don't appear on this checklist. They might have some cards in the future series. Jacob Bryson of the Sabres has been playing pretty regularly. Not a high-end guy. Joey Keane, Hurricanes, low level, and then of course the checklist with Trevor Zegras and Cole Caulfield. For whatever reason, the checklist always sells, and so you want to hunt for that. So that is the review of the Series 1 checklist. I will also have a video up pretty soon here in terms of going over some of the guys that are not on Series 1, and there is a lot of guys. So we will review some of those guys. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'm hoping to put out more good content for you in the future. Doing some breaks, some rips for hockey, as well as reviewing a lot of young guns information in terms of some of the more valuable young guns going back in the last 7-8 years. Pretty much that is my focus in terms of making future videos, is talking about young gun prices in terms of values and just trying to discuss the different series and which guys have turned out and which guys haven't. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Until next time.